Here we go. We're rolling live here on our YouTube channel now. Okay, fantastic. Okay, everyone can hear me by the way online? Yes? Okay, great. And mazel tov to Gail Mahler on being honored at the Westchester Hebrew High School dinner recently, this past week. Okay, all right. So tonight let's begin here. We actually some weeks ago we studied the Shir Shel Yom for Sunday, which was Psalm 24. It also comes up in the context of the high holidays, as I mentioned at the time when we were learning it. But what I want to think about now is just when we look at Psalm 24, which was the Psalm for Sunday, the main focus of this really talked about letting God in, bringing Him into our lives, or trying to make our holy places. And who could stand in God's presence? No one really can. And we talk about just being in the presence of God, which is a very great way to start the week. Right? The way we start our week is hopefully that we have God in our lives. So if you just turn the page right over to source number 2, this is Rav Avi Baumel's an introduction to this chapter of Tehillim 48 that we're going to study tonight. He says in the end, we're reaching back to the Sunday topic, Psalm 24 teaches us how to view ourselves in a world given to man by a God who began it, sustains it, and will ultimately end it. A sobering and comforting message. God is before us and after us, but at the same time, He is watching over us as a father witnesses the first steps of a child with love and devotion. That's what he wrote about the Psalm for Sunday. Okay, that is, God is in charge. God is King. Mihu ze melech hakavod, Hashem hu Hashem tzvaot hu melech hakavod. Right, that God is the King. So if Sunday is about a new beginning, right, and a knowledge of an eternal ending as well, then what of Monday? If God's about the beginning of the week, we remind ourselves to ensure that God is in our lives as we head into this week. What about Monday? What's Monday all about? It's lost on us because Monday for us is the beginning of the work week. That was not the case in the ancient world for a Jew, for sure, or in Israel today. Right, the beginning of the work week is when Shabbos ends. Right, it's you probably get the jitters. I don't know. I get this on Sunday night before the week starts, and it's another week coming up. That probably happens on Saturday night, I assume, in Israel. Right, that probably you move it up a day. So if the previous psalm encouraged us to acknowledge God as our Creator, Sustainer, and Father in heaven, then where is our next step? Where does our week begin? The answer is simple. Israel. He says, Israel. It is impossible for anyone to read the Bible, read Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, God's word to His people. Right? That's even particular more focused towards the 5 books of the Torah, without simply realizing that He chose a land where His children of Israel would and should dwell. God tells this to Avram, He tells it to Yitzchak, He tells it to Yaakov, to Moshe throughout the Torah, and the children of Israel themselves time and time again. We're going to look in just a few minutes at just a few smattering of examples where Israel plays a central role throughout the throughout the 5 books of the Torah, and in particular during a time in which the Jews are not in the land of Israel. Right? Avram lived in Israel, Yitzchak lived in Israel, Yaakov lived in Israel, but Moshe never. It's funny. It was one of the crazy things I was thinking about. Moshe never set foot in Israel. He looked. God took him up to the mountain, said, "Look, because you're not going to go. Look, you're not going to go." And Moshe, who we don't look up to anyone more than Moshe, but Moshe never ever set foot in the land of Israel. It's such sometimes it's stunning that the leader or the face of our people never saw that land with his feet on it. He saw it, but he didn't actually step on it. Okay, so we'll look at a few examples that are peppered throughout the Torah. Take a look at source number 3, our study for tonight, Tehillim Memchet. And we'll just, as we do every time, we'll just read it and just try to understand it on a very basic level. And then we'll really try to delve into it a little deeper. Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. This, as I said before, is a Mizmor, is a song that is a psalm of the sons of Korach. This is not literal. I don't know if this is literally the sons of Korach or it's the descendants of Korach. Because if you remember when we looked at some of the passages in Tanakh last week, in the parts of Tanakh where you have to like kind of dust it off really in Divrei Hayamim, it mentions there the sons of Korach. But it's not literally, obviously it's not literally the sons of Korach, it's perhaps the descendants of Korach. So, okay. Gadol Hashem hulal me'od be'ir Elokeinu har kodsho. God is great and much acclaimed in the city of our God. Okay, he is great. He's acclaimed, mehulal, from the word halel. He's great. He's praised greatly. And in the city of God, right? In the city of God, where his holy mountain is. Okay. Yefei nof. Okay, so all that really was saying is God's great, and he live and not live, but he's much acclaimed. He's praised in particular. Where? Probably a reference here to Yerushalayim, right? Har Kodsho. Yefei nof misos kol haaretz. Har Tzion yarkitei tzafon kiryat melech rav. Okay, saying here that beautifully scenic, we'll say, misos kol haaretz, the joy of all the land, is what? Har Tzion, right? Mount Zion, right? I think this is a pretty explicit reference here to Yerushalayim. Yarkitei Tzafon. It is the summit of Tzafon. Tzafon usually means north. So I'll have to think about. There's at least an argument. What does that mean? Yarkitei Tzafon. There's at least some arguments back and forth amongst the commentators. Kiryat. Now, what does the word Kiryat mean? Many of the cities in Israel, some cities in Israel have the Kiryat in their name. Right? Kiryat Arba. Kiryat Shmona, all right. Isn't there also Kiryat Gat, right? Kiryat Yoel, right? That's Kiryas. Kiryas. Yeah. Yeah. What does it mean? It means a city. Okay. Melech Rav. It's the city of the great king. Okay. So again, we seem to be describing with great fanfare. We seem to be describing Yerushalayim. Elokim be'armenoteha. What's an armon? Palace. Yeah, it's a palace. So God is in his, or sorry, not Elokim. Yeah, God is in the armenoteha, in the palaces of the city of Jerusalem. Now he didn't say one. Armenoteha is plural, right? This is not a reference to a temple. Could also be including a temple. But Armenoteha means that through its palaces, Noda lemiskav, God makes himself known to as a miskav, as a guardian. Okay, God makes it known through the palaces. People go walk through the city of Yerushalayim, and you see the beautiful buildings in Yerushalayim. This is what I imagine what he's seeing. When you look at the beautiful buildings of Yerushalayim, you know that God is here and that God is the guardian of this city. God is protecting the city. Ki hinei hamalachim noadu avru yachtav. He says here, behold, ki hinei hamalachim noadu, the kings have joined forces and advanced. They're advancing. Avru yachdav. Ki hinei hamalachim noadu. They are advancing. They've joined forces and they are advancing together. Now, what in the world is he describing here? Who joined forces? It's not yet clear who's joining forces. So, on the surface, it's some enemy. This could be just not a description of historically some incidents, but more speaking of the praises of Yerushalayim and particularly of God guarding Yerushalayim. Take a look at the next verse. Hema ra'u, they see it. Right? At the sight of these stunning buildings. Kain tamahu. Tamua is to be like, look at this place. This is unbelievable. Look at this city. They saw it, they were stunned. They were bitmiyas, like they were just bewildered. Nivhalu nechpazu. They were, then what happened? First, you're stunned at something, you can't believe what you're looking at. Then the next emotions kick in, right? Sometimes you realize by the awesomeness of the situation, you realize, I'm in trouble now. And so then what happened? Nivhalu, they were terrified. And then they started to panic. Nechpazu. They start to panic. So it's just some generic enemy. The generic enemy sees this city, see the beautiful buildings. They know that this means that God is protecting the city. They then realize this, and then they're, almost like in a cartoon, right? As they're trying to slow down, they're really trying to go the other way already. Okay? Zion, achazatam, sham, chil kayoleda. So what happens? Again, describing how panic-stricken they are here. They were seized. Ra'ada means trembling. Achaz is to grab, to seize. They were seized with trembling sham over there. Chil kayoleda, like the throes of labor of a woman. Again, of a woman who's in labor. So this is the kind of almost pain they're in, that they've now realized what they're going up against. Beruach kadim. Tishaber aniyot Tarshish. Okay, with the easterly wind, the Tarshish fleet was aniyot are boats, a fleet of boats, ships. Tarshish is a city where Tishaber destroyed. The Ruach Kadim Tishaber aniyot Tarshish. I guess they're trying to attack by sea, even though the Yerushalayim is not by the sea. But the idea being here that they're blown away like the wind blows away ships that are going towards Tarshish. Now, side point. Pause sheer for a moment. Where else do we know Tarshish in the Bible? Yonah. Why does he come? I'm giving you a whole different drush. It's Yom Kippur now for a second. Perhaps maybe I talked about this in the JCC meeting. I don't remember. If I didn't, I had an idea and I filed it away for next year. I don't remember. I have to go back to my notes. Tarshish. Why did Yonah go to Tarshish? Not just right away. He could run to Rome. He could run to why Tarshish? And how was he going to go to Tarshish? What was he going to do? What did he do? He got on a boat. He got on a boat going towards Tarshish. What does this pasuk tell us about the story of Yonah? That's not in the story of Yonah. When Yonah got on the boat, what was he trying to do to himself? He put himself in harm's way. This is clearly here. This is a thing that people knew in the ancient world. Beruach Hadim, if there was ever winds on the way to Tarshish, word on the street was there were a lot of shipwrecks. I'm not saying that every boat ever, but he knew when he was running away that there was a good possibility God would, and perhaps he wanted this, maybe. So if you really kind of analyze Yonah's character a little bit different, in depth, Yonah did not, it seems like he wanted to not live. And he puts himself on a boat. Now, I'm not saying that's definitely what he wanted to do, but he could have put himself on a boat to anywhere. But he goes on a boat to Tarshish. It is interesting to note this pasuk in the context of that. I leave it to the darshanim here in the room, and I'm watching on there to figure that out. One of the things I think when I read this, when I first made this connection, Yonah was looking to get away completely. He was going to be happy to be on a shipwreck, wash up ashore somewhere. Everyone will think he's gone and he can live a new life. Perhaps because he really at one point he wanted God to even kill him. He said, "Kill me! I don't want to do this mission to go to Nineveh." So something to think about here. This is a known fact that the easterly winds would blow on ships that were going to Tarshish, and there would be a shipwreck. By the way, the story even goes, they nearly had a shipwreck, right? The winds blew, the boat was rocking back and forth. They don't know what's wrong. They find this guy in the hole, Yonah, and they realize he realizes he's the cause. By the way, this is also, again, so I'm getting totally off track, but this is why if you really read into his character, if you're in the middle of a ship that's going, woo, right? If you're a particularly religious person, as some of them seem to have been on that boat, you're trying to figure out, how do I appease God right now, right? Or how do I stop this shipwreck? What does he do when it starts getting really bad? He goes to sleep. I'm fine with this. Whatever happens, happens. I don't want to do your mission, God. A normal human reaction is, oh my God, the boat's going to capsize, and I'm going down with the boat. How can I save the boat? He doesn't care. Yonah doesn't care. He goes to bed. They have to find him in the hole. Oh, what are you doing down here? Yonah. Anyway, so there's more to talk about when we get to before Yom Kippur. But this is a very important pasuk to understanding Yonah. Okay. Now there's a shift here. Okay, verse number 9, things will shift a little bit. Ka'asher shamanu kein ra'inu. Be'ir Hashem tzvakot be'ir Elokeinu Elokim yichoneneha ad olam selah. The likes of that we heard, the likes of what we heard, we have now witnessed in the city of the Lord, the Lord of hosts, meaning we heard about this, but now we saw it ourselves in the city of God.
What are they doing? Power?
Yes, I think so, because in the next phrase, Elokim yichoneneha ad olam, right? God is going to preserve it forever, right? So it sounds like the protection that they've seen firsthand, God's hand in protecting the Jewish people, protecting the city of Yerushalayim. Okay. Take a look now, verse 10. Verse 10. Okay. I'm realizing maybe I need to plug in soon. Okay. Pasuk here. Diminu Elokim chasdecha v'kerev heichalecha. We picture, right? Diminu is an image, right? We picture, God, your kindness. We picture your kindness, God. B'kerev heichalecha. Where do we picture it? Now we go from the power of Jerusalem to we're focusing on God's, in the temple. Heichalecha. Heichal was the courtyard of the temple. We picture you, God, in your temple. Kishimcha Elokim kein tihilatcha al katzvei eretz tzedek mala yaminech. Your name, God, like your praise, right? Your name, God, like your praise, reaches to the ends of the earth, katzvei aretz, to the ends of the earth. Tzedek mala yaminecha, righteousness embodies your right hand, which is his power. Right? Righteousness, meaning your power, is embodied also in righteousness. God doesn't just show off his might for the sake of anything. He does it out of righteousness for people. Yismach Har Zion. Mount Zion should rejoice. Tagelna benot Yehuda. Daughters of Yehuda, you should tagelna, you should exalt, and enjoy. Leman mishpatecha. Because of your judgments, right? We often think of tzedek and mishpat going together, righteousness and justice. Because of God's justice, Har Zion should rejoice, and the daughters of Yehuda should be beside. There should be such a state of joy. Sobut Zion v'hakifuha sifru migdaleha. Circle Zion, circle it. Sifru, count, the word like Spirat HaOmer, right? Count migdaleha, count its towers, right? A migdal is a tower. Count its towers. Shitu libchem lechela pasgu armenoteha. Right? Come back to our armenot here, our palaces, right? Your hearts contemplate. Let your hearts contemplate the structures. Pasgu armenoteha. Go through the palaces in this city. Laman tisapru, so that you can count. Ledor acharon, here it's lisaper, so you can recount it for the later generations, for future generations. Right? Really memorize this city. Know what it feels like to be in Yerushalayim, so that you can tell it one day to somebody else. Right? And you can describe the grandeur of it and the godliness of that city. Kizeh Elokim. Kizeh Elokim, he says here. This is for this God, Elokim Olam Va'ed, our eternal God. Hu yinahagenu, he will lead us, right? And the word, hag is the leader, right? Almut, he will lead us evermore, right? Till the end. He will lead us to the end. Right? So it's about the beginning of this really is about the enemies realizing that they are nothing to, they really can't hold a candle to God's magnificent city. They realize God's in charge. And by perhaps us seeing this wonderful city of Yerushalayim, we also forever etch into our minds and perhaps into our hearts the greatness and the grandeur of God in this space, and that God is ultimately our leader till the end. Okay, now let's really delve into this. So I mentioned before that I wanted to show you a few examples of where Israel in the Torah, is so central to our religion. Before there was even a Jewish people in Israel, right? And in between the time of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov there is a very strong presence of the Jewish people. Take a look at source number 4, 5, 6, and 7. We'll go through it pretty quickly. Here's an example. V'haya, this is in Parshat Bo. V'haya ki tavo el haaretz. Asher yitain Hashem lachem kasher diberu shmartem et ha'avodah hazot. This is talking about the Korban Pesach, Paschal sacrifice, that talking about the future. When you enter the land of Israel, you shall do all these laws. This is why. How many times do the Jews do the Korban Pesach? They did it obviously the night before they left Egypt. How many more times did they do it? In the desert, they only did it one time. The first year afterwards, they celebrated Pesach, and then God said, you don't have to do this until you get to Israel. Okay, so they had one Pesach, and that's where the whole thing of Pesach Sheni comes up when the daughters of when there are people, mischaracterization. That's a different thing. That's the breaking up of the tribal lands, and whether if there's no inheritance for a son, can the daughters be the ones who inherit? The answer is yes. The other question God has to answer for Moshe is this question, which is if there is sorry, I lost my train of thought. So about the Korban Pesach, I was talking about without Slavchad, but that was wrong, and I totally forgot. Okay, whatever. See, I'm having my brain is not working day. Anyways,
See?
yeah, I've had a few of them in the last hour. Anyways. Bottom line, Korban Pesach. We're talking about Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach, the first year they had to do it, and then until they got to the land of Israel, they did not do this mitzvah. When they got there, that became relevant again. So this is introduced as many mitzvahs are v'hayaki tavo el haaretz. Oh, because they were far away. That was what they in the first year. Korban Pesach Sheni comes up because there were people who were carrying the deceased bodies. The Midrash says it was carrying Yosef's bones. So they couldn't do Korban Pesach. You have to be ritually pure for the Korban Pesach. Said, why are you punishing us? We're doing a mitzvah here of Levayat Hamet. We're escorting the dead body here of the bones, and you're punishing us that we can't take part in this ritual, which is where the idea of Pesach Sheni comes from. God says, fine, no, I hear you. It's built into the system. I have a Pesach Sheni. You'll make up for it. You'll become ritually pure. Someone else will take your job, and you'll do your Korban Pesach a month later. Anyways, I corrected my senior mom. Okay, number 5. Source number 5.
So that's what this was talking about.
Yes, that's the context. That's about the idea of Korban Pesach. It's not really relevant
Right.
until they got to Israel.
So this right refers to the Korban Pesach.
Yes. Yep. And number 5. This is talking about tzarat on the house. This is only relevant if the house is in Israel. Okay, a lot of the mitzvot are relevant only in Israel. Again, take a look at the next passage, which we just read this past week, when it comes to the Omer. Daber b'nei Yisrael, source number 6. Say to the Jewish people, Ki tavo el haaretz, not our introduction to the mitzvah. When you enter the land of Israel, that I will give you, you will reap the harvest, and then you'll bring the Omer. That's this Korban HaOmer, the barley offering. Reshit kitzirchem el Kohen, you'll bring it to the Kohen. This is what's called the Korban HaOmer. Only relevant in the land of Israel. Right? When you get there, this will become relevant. This week's parsha we're about to read. Daber b'nei Yisrael, Parsha Bahar. Say to the children of Israel, speak to them and say to them, Ki tavo el eretz el haaretz asher nitei lachem v'shavta haaretz shabbat laHashem. When does the Shemitah cycle begin? The 7-year cycle When you get to the land of Israel, the Shemitah cycle didn't start counting when they left Egypt or when they were at Har Sinai. When you get to the land of Israel, this mitzvah becomes relevant. It also says it's something similar to this by the mitzvah of Hafrashat Chala. It says when you get to the land of Israel and you may have dough, that's when you should separate it. We do it still at Chutz La'aretz. Let's do it. It's a mitzvah, the Rabbanon. Even today in Israel, it's a question whether it's not a question. Today, it's not a doraita in Israel. Perhaps if the majority of the Jews live in Israel, then it becomes a doraita. Not our topic today. Many other mitzvot are only applicable in Israel on a biblical level. Truma, Maser, that's the tithe, the tithing to the Kohanim, the Leviim. The mitzvah of Orla actually applies also outside of Israel. The first 3 years of the fruit tree, you're not allowed to eat the fruit. That's even outside of Israel. But there are others that are land-based mitzvot that I'm blanking on right now. I mean, there's Shemitah, obviously. Just going through all the mitzvot in my head, the Masechtot and Zeraim right now. So there's Shvit, we talked about. There's Chala. There's Bikurim. Bikurim is only relevant if the fruits grow in Israel. I mentioned Truma, Maser, Maser Sheni, the second tithe. These are all land mitzvot, only relevant in Israel. A lot of the Torah is only Israel. Now, I'm going to teach you a source here that is just stunning. Just stunning. But before I do that, give me one moment. I need to get an extension.
You okay?
He's very good.
He's fine.
Barry, her husband, did a root canal.
That's one.
Now, the last week I said, it's like almost like Botox, with like built out my wrinkles.
Dentists do take
I don't want them to miss out here.
many courses.
Okay, all right. So take a look. This is the best source of all the sources here tonight. Even though it's not really fully explaining the Psalm directly, it's very important. This is the Ramban in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 11. We're not going to read the whole thing. But he says here,
Thank you.
and let me actually give one more light of context. Thank you so much. Let me give one more word of context. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there is a midrash about our forefathers that says, now, this midrash says what? That they kept the entire Torah. We're familiar with this, right? We've heard this idea that the Avot kept the Torah. Whether that's literal or not, it bothers me not. Thank you so much, Andres. Really, really appreciate this. They kept all 613 mitzvot. They had a window into the mitzvot, and they kept the Torah. They kept it. Okay, I can accept it. It's a midrash. I mean, it's not literal. What's the problem with this? If you say that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov kept all 613 mitzvot, what's the question that should bother us? Torah wasn't given yet. That's a good logical question. Yes. Temple wasn't built. Okay, so let's say they had the korbanot weren't relevant to them. They didn't have to do them. But the things that they could do, they could. What's the problem? There are a few really, really, really big problems. The biggest one I'll point out, there is a commandment in the Torah that says you're not allowed to marry two sisters. Yaakov married two sisters. So that makes sense. This midrash, and they're written by his rabbis who supposedly know a little bit. And they write this despite the fact that Yaakov marries two sisters. Right? Yaakov marries two sisters. Okay, there's also a verse that says you're not allowed to build a matzeva. Not like a gravestone, like a what's the word? A monument. You're not supposed to make monuments. Okay, there's a pasuk in the Torah. What does Yaakov do when he's going to when he's on his way? He's out of the land of Israel. He's either on his way to Haran or coming back from Haran. It's when he has a dream. And he builds a monument. He basically acknowledges that there are certain things that the Avo did. By the way, ready? I mean, Avram didn't eat it, but he also he served a meal with milchiks and fleishiks. Did you catch that there? He goes to Sarah's baking the cake. Lushi and has milk in it. right? Chema. And then he's going Ve'el Habakaratz Avraham. He goes to slaughter the. He served. Okay, maybe he served in order. Of course, that's the shot answer. So the question is, where is the midrash? And then let's use, for our sake tonight, let's use the question of Yaakov marrying two sisters as being a problem for this midrash. Ramban has a very clever answer to this question within the context of the midrash. And the rabbis knew this, and they weren't bothered by it. They didn't hesitate in saying this midrash, which may have other reasons for them saying it, even if it's not literal. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this next page here, where it says that Ramban, source number 8. Okay. V'samtem et divrei ela. Okay, this is the pasuk that's being commented on, which sound familiar. You're supposed to put these words on your heart. V'samtem et divrei ela al lavchem. Okay. Ramban says, Af la'achar shetiglu, right? Even after you have been exiled, hayu mitsuyanim b'mitzvot. You should be distinguished. You should be, steeped in mitzvot. Hanichot tefillin. Keep putting on tefillin. Asu mezuzah. Everyone should put a mezuzah on their door. Right. So after you've been exiled, you should continue. Ramban says that God is here saying, you're putting these words of the Torah on your heart, so that when you will be exiled one day, you'll take them with you to your exile, and you'll continue to do the mitzvot in exile. Right? The mezuzah, you'll keep in exile, you'll put your mezuzah up. No problem. Take the words with you when you leave Israel. Why? The Ramban says, Kidei shelo yu alechem chadashim keshetachzeru, so that they shall not seem new to you when you return to Israel. And he goes on and basically says, and this is how he answers the question about Yaakov marrying two sisters, outside the land of Israel, the mitzvot don't really apply. He says that's why he can marry two sisters. Where did he marry the two sisters? In Haran. He wasn't in Israel. So he says the Torah doesn't apply if you live outside Israel. Why do we do the mitzvot? So that when we get back to Israel, we know what we're doing. He says, Shelo yu aleichem chadashim kishetachzeru. Not because you're commanded to do them. So that when you come back to Israel, after the Galus is over, you'll know what to do. Otherwise, if you stop doing it, you will forget. If certainly your children don't know what they're doing, they'll never have a chance. So you have to continue to do the mitzvot, so that one day when you get back to Israel, your descendants get back to Israel one day, they'll know what to do. But outside of Israel, the Ramban seems to say, it's a fascinating position. Many disagree with him, okay? That the Torah was given to be observed in the land of Israel, and therefore any mitzvah and therefore, if you're out the land of Israel, it's only, as I like to put it when I've taught this source to my students, it's practice. It's practice so that when you get to the real game, Eretz Yisrael, you'll know what to do. That's the Ramban's position. Maybe you like it, huh? That's the Ramban. Now, of course, the Ramban at least he backed up his words. What did he do at the end of his life? He made Aliyah. Okay, so at least he lived what he preached. He practiced what he preached. Exactly. He practiced what he preached. And so this is very important. When we think of Israel, the centrality of Israel, so much so that the Ramban here, and of course, Jerusalem being the center focus of Israel, spiritually, Israel is where the Torah is meant. Whether you take the Ramban literally at face value or not, right? He's right. Israel is where the Jewish people are supposed to be. That's the Jewish homeland where God gave the land to our forefathers. And again, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying you take the Ramban's position and be very stark about if you live outside of Israel, that doesn't even count. But we can all acknowledge the centrality of Israel to the Jewish people. That is certainly, if you read the Bible from cover to cover, you can't walk away with any other message. And Israel matters to the Jewish people. Israel was, the center from times of Abraham. Okay. Let's go on now to source number 9. Now that we've really understand the centrality of Israel in the Torah, right? Just the Torah, how important Israel is. So Rav Avi Baumel here writes, the psalm can be roughly split into 4 sections. What we've read can be split into 4 sections. What are the 4 sections? He says, roughly because I say roughly because I am unsure about verse 9, which we'll get to in a moment. Clearly, verses 1, an introduction, through 4, praise God, not as God of over the children of Israel, not as personal savior, but as for his unyielding connection and guardianship over the land of Israel, his holy mountain, Har Zion, and Har Kodsho, right, Yerushalayim. God is connected. He guards over this particularly uniquely special city in our tradition, Yerushalayim. Okay. Verses 5 through 8 describe a historical event, or perhaps a collage of historical events that consider what happens when an external force attempts to conquer Jerusalem, and God is protecting it. Armies shudder, nations are repelled, kings are frightened. No one will penetrate its borders. By the way, it's very, even historically, I remember when I was studying in a class I was in graduate school about Yeshayahu, the book of Yeshayahu, and in the year 701 BCE, Sancherib, who was the king of the Assyrian kingdom, which was a powerful, mighty empire in those days, they could not figure out how to defeat Jerusalem. They are the ones who, scattered the other 10 tribes all over the world. Our lost 10 tribes today. They conquered much of the rest of the area around in Judah, but they could not figure out Yerushalayim. And there are very vivid stories in chapters 36 and 37 of the book of Isaiah that talk about how they defeated the Assyrians, who had a mightier empire and army, but they had the walled city, and this walled city was impenetrable. And the key was that Chizkiyahu was the king at the time, who, if you ever walked in the water tunnels, that was Chizkiyahu. He commissioned that job. So Chizkiyahu was great at taking care of everyone in the city, particularly the poorest. And the poorest people, who were the ones who were often by the wall, if you're going to break it through the city, you need help from the inside. And the people who might feel disenfranchised are the ones who might often help the external foe the most. And they are the ones who actually stood by Chizkiyahu because he stood by them. And so one of the things about Yerushalayim that was so unique is that it was a very difficult place to conquer. Even the Romans, how did the Romans, when they destroyed the second temple, how did the Romans succeed in finally breaching Jerusalem? What happened? It was an inside job. Jews helped the Romans, right? The Jews were fighting each other. We know this very well. There were different factions. And then it was the Jews themselves who helped. Some say, by the way, what was his name? Josephus may have been a helper too on this one. That the Jews, they helped the Romans in breaching the wall. So Jerusalem, historically speaking, is pretty accurate that it was a very difficult city to conquer for enemies. And in that 701 attack of BCE, the Syrian army has a plague that eventually, at some point, they're trying to surround it. There's a plague that strikes the people. It's talked about in Tanakh. The coolest part: archaeologists found a lot of dead people who date back exactly to that time outside the city in what seems to have been an attempted siege. So you have archaeology showing that the story in Tanakh is accurate. So it's very interesting that Yerushalayim was very hard for these mighty empires to really breach. So anyways, with that in mind, let's continue on here. Verses 5, armies shudder, nations are repelled, kings are frightened, no one will penetrate its borders. Verses 10 through 12 change direction as the call is made to God directly. You look back at the verses, you see it's speaking directly to God at that point. Diminu Elokim chasdecha, your kindness, right? We're talking to God now. So as if to say, we have praised God. We have seen the historical glory of God and the miracles he performed for his land. Now we look to you, God, and praise you for your unbending kindness. Know that your righteousness is proclaimed throughout the land itself rejoices. Right? So it's like, we've seen what you've done, and now just know, Hashem, God, we see you. We see it, we appreciate it, we acknowledge it, we understand it. The final section of the psalm is a call to the people. Right? The last part here. Circle the land. Look through its citadels, right? The palaces. Count its magnificent structures so that you can recall this greatness to the next generation. So you can tell the story to your children, your grandchildren, about the beauty of Yerushalayim. You don't live in Yerushalayim, you live in the north of Israel. You live here. They didn't go every day. Maybe they went again 3 times a year maximally. right? Or perhaps one day we understood that maybe there will be an exile. No, you should know this. The Jewish people throughout the years should always know Yerushalayim. Tell them that God's connection and protection of the land will never cease, for He will guide us in it to eternity. Right? God is going to be always there, and is ultimately going to protect us. So this is the overall structure of the chapter. Now, the one thing, and I think he so beautifully points out here, Rabbi Baumol, is that some parts were easy to identify what was happening. That one pasuk was really kind of a confusing one. I'm just going to reread it again in source number 3, which is pasuk tet. Ka'asher shamanu kein ra'inu. Right? The likes of that we heard, we have now witnessed. We've seen it, right?
See, I mean, I'm finding myself struggling. I mean, so
Mhm.
my transition is a little bit different, but he's talking about verses 5 through 8, describing an historical event.
Right.
I'm
So he's saying it could be a historical event, or it could be like a more, as I said earlier, a more generic enemy is attacking, Yerushalayim, cannot figure out how to defeat Jerusalem, is then realizing again, is this really what they're thinking, or is this David HaMelech, sort of, or Bnei Korach, putting the thoughts into their head, saying, "We realize now how great God is. We cannot defeat this God of the Jews." They turn around in panic. They're struck in fear. It doesn't have to be a historical event. I know Rabbi Baumol said unhistorical event, or I think he also said or something else, or this is sort of a repeating story of Jewish history, that people try to conquer Jerusalem only to realize they can't. Right? So it's not a one-time moment. This is what my gut says. This is not a one-time moment they're trying to recall here. They're talking about Jerusalem as in its, as a city that is just, impenetrable. Obviously, it was penetrated sometimes, but it was a very, very strong city. I personally don't take it as a one-time event. I think the way it's written sounds more like describing the challenges of conquering Jerusalem for the enemy, generic enemy.
And that's what I get from this.
Mhm.
As soon as they saw it, they were astounded, they were frightened, they were afraid. Fear took hold of them there.
I think of it as a generic enemy, right?
To break the Tarshish, the power of God to cause these winds that's so powerful.
That break them.
Like
Yeah.
there was a fear of this ruach that just permeated.
That permeated out of
the city,
Yerushalayim. That's right. Right. There's something there that makes the enemy realize I picked on the wrong person right now. Yeah. Right. Right. It's yeah. So okay. So let's keep going. Source number 10 here. Let's keep reading a little further here. The verse in question is verse 9. Okay. Where does it belong? As opposed to the subsequent verses that call out to God, right? That the latter parts that talk about it, talking to God. Yeah, we see you, God, your kindness, and we are singing, and the daughters of Yehuda are parading and getting excited. This verse makes an editorial comment, but as opposed to the previous verses which describe a miraculous event, this verse reverts to the beginning praises of God. In the city of our God, God will preserve it. So it sounds a little bit like the beginning. The earlier part was God is the keeper of Jerusalem. He keeps it safe. Then it went to the enemies. Now we're talking about it again, right? If you remember, just recall the pasuk, right? The likes of that, which of what we heard, we have now witnessed in the city of the Lord our hosts, in the city of our God, may God preserve it forever. Sounds like really the first 4 verses about God preserving the city. So where does this belong? It's just kind of floating here in the middle, he's saying. So where does this word, verse 9, belong? What is its significance? So he writes, I think in verse 9 lies the key to unlocking the beauty and timeless message for all Jews, especially in our day and age. One may look at the Mizmor, this chapter, and consider it as a series of random statements about Israel and God. That is not the case. The psalm is a progression. There is a message inherent in it that confronts our understanding of God's providence over us throughout the ages. In the beginning of the psalm, the poet praises God for his greatness with regard to his holy city. God, as if to say, stations himself in the palace over Jerusalem and protects it from harm. In this, he is Noda Lemisgav. He is known as its guardian. Right? He is known, that's how we know him. He is the guardian. The point of departure is an objective description of God's control over his most precious earthly dwelling, Jerusalem, the place of his temple. His Shekhinah dwells there, his presence. In the land of Israel, upon Har Tzion, the mountain of Zion, on the summit of Tzafon, right? And it's the tippy top of Yerushalayim, right? And on top of that, on the roof of the citadels, right? Go look up at the top of these big buildings in Yerushalayim, stands God, protector and guardian of this most cherished place. Now, I know in Yerushalayim, you go today, there are not skyscrapers in Yerushalayim. There are no skyscrapers. It's not like you walk around in New York City or any of or Tel Aviv for that matter, right? Tel Aviv is skyscrapers. But in those days, who knows? We think of like, oh, these tall buildings. We have to temper our thinking. We're not thinking Empire State Building here. In those days, there was no such thing, right? But Jerusalem perhaps had some of the most well-established, and beautiful buildings. Of course, the temple was the precious jewel of the city. But again, so you don't think, it's like a tower up in the sky here. It could be something a lot smaller, but in those days that might have seemed like a large structure. Okay, so we have here this idea that God is standing over us. So we still haven't figured out what is this floating pasuk doing here. So take a look at the next source here for a moment. This is he quotes here from Amos Chacham. Amos Chacham wrote a commentary in the Dat Mikra version of Tehillim. I have a copy in my house, and he was a scholar. He was a brilliant Tanakh scholar. So Amos Chacham, take a look here. In this commentary, Dat Mikra offers the theory. I don't think even that long ago. I think he was, I'll tell you right now. Amos Chacham. He lived in. There's a picture of him? There are pictures of him. That's already tells you how recent it is. For Amos Chacham, he was a contemporary scholar here. The author of this. He died in 2012, not that long ago. Yeah, he was really a very accomplished from 1921 to 2012. He wrote a commentary on all of Tehillim. He wrote a commentary on Eov. And you can find it if you buy the Dat Mikra version of the books. He wrote that commentary. He's a brilliant guy. He lived there. That's right. So Amos Chacham in his commentary Dat Mikra offers a theory later expanded by Nachum Sarna in his book Song of the Heart, that in talking about this word tzafon, right? Because you think of tzafon as north, but it's obviously describing something in Yerushalayim here. So what's the tzafon? The epithet tzafon in ancient times did not refer to a geographic location, right? The way we think of it on a map. He said in the Bible, but rather to a toponym, a place name by which ancient kings would call the special abode of the highest God. So tzafon was used to refer to a place of their special dwelling place of their God. So it's not surprising that tzafon here, the five were Hashem's. And if you're going to describe Yerushalayim using that kind of a descriptor, tzafon makes sense. So he does some investigative stuff, investigative work here. And Amos Chacham uncovers this idea or this theory that tzafon is not a direction. It does translate into north, but tzafon is also used as describing the place where your most highest God is associated. Judaism is only one God, of course. So that's just Yerushalayim. Okay, so there's one word about that. Now, take a look now. This is from Sefer Bereshit. Perek Chavchet, Pasuk Yud Zayin, source number 12. Here we have a pasuk that hopefully sounds familiar to us. Some of you just walked by it a few minutes ago outside on the the dedication stone of the shul. Vayira, Vayomar. So he was kind of terrified here. This is Yaakov speaking, right after he has his vision of God at Beit El. Vayomar, he says, Ma norah hamakom hazeh, oh, Yivei, I didn't realize how awesome this place is. Ein zeh ki im Beit Elokim. This is none other than the house of God, where I am now. V'zeh shar hashamayim, and I have found the gates to heaven. It's here, right? This is the house of God, and this is the gate to reach it. Okay, so with that pasuk, just holding on to it here. This is the idea of God being in the, God being very high, even though he's on earth, right? Yaakov has this dream down here on earth. He's the place where the temple, right? Is in God's presence. And he's though grounded to Har Zion at that moment. He's here, he's on the earth. But at that moment, he says, V'zeh shar hashamayim, I found the gate to heaven. Right? Ein zeh ki im Beit Elokim, he is connected up here. Even though he's down here, you can be connected with the idea that you're down low, but this is the highest place. This is the highest place. God's gate is right here. Zeh shar hashamayim. Again, by the way, if you don't realize that's our shul. On the outside of the shul, take a look. There's a stone which has this pasuk on it. Take a look if you're when you go outside tonight. That's the. I think it's just Manorah Makom Hazeh Ein Zeh Ki Ein Beit Elokim V'zeh Shar Hashamayim. I think that's what it says out there. But now I'm going to take a look. You think it just says Ein Zeh Ki? What do you think it says? Manorah Makom Hazeh. Okay, I'll just take a look. I probably filled in the rest of my brain. That's how it works sometimes, Anyways, okay, very good. So I have to look on the way out tonight. Yes, I have a question or comment. Okay, so let's take a look at the last source here on the last page. Let's put this all together. The first half of the psalm until the end of verse 8 focuses exclusively on God. Okay, we got that, and his protection of his land. The sections are devoted to statements of praise of God and historical proofs for the statement, right? So that God protects. Here are the stories, generically, that God protects from enemies who have experienced this. The tenor of the psalm changes with verse 9. It introduces us. We become part of the story now. We, of course, are the children of Israel, and this land is our land, promised to us by God himself. But should we be included in the psalm? Depends on the nature of how we yearn for and ultimately actualize our dreams to return to Israel and inhabit God's holy city. Thus, the second half of the psalm begins with verse 9, with an important change in tense. That which we have heard, we have seen in God's city. We are playing a more active role suddenly now in the psalm. We are noticing you, God. We're noticing what's happening. This is a personalization, he writes here, subjectification, that takes place in which the author includes our perspective on God's presence. Not just a description of God, but now we're seeing it. We've in our life seen it with our own eyes. It is therefore natural that we turn and speak to God, stating, we imagined your kindness, God. Right? That's what it says. Now we must experience it in our own, right? If you go back to the psalm, right, this is source number 3, you see that it says, where is it? Right? Kasher Shamanu. We've heard about it until now, and now we see it. Right? We're a part of this story. We see it. Kain Ra'inu Be'ir Hashem, Sako Be'ir Elokeinu. Right? Diminu Elokim Chasdech. Right? The praise, reaches the ends of the earth. Right? But now we've seen it. We're a part of this. As a result of this realization of verses 9 to 11, it follows that verses 12 to 14 call on the Jewish people, those in the land of Israel around Har Zion, and perhaps those not yet in the land of Israel, to rejoice in the land. Appreciate what you have. Right? Encircle it. Right? Almost like you're imagining people are making a hakafa and dancing. Right? Make sure it is ours. Count our towers, appreciate it. See that beautiful building? What a magnificent, look, we have the, and by the way, for Jews today with the state of Israel now, wow, we should walk around the whole place, go, I can't believe it. 100 years ago, this is a pipe dream, look, even in Tel Aviv, look at the skyscrapers now in Tel Aviv. Who could imagine? Look in Yerushalayim, now they have like suburbs on top of suburbs on top of suburbs on top of, soon Jerusalem's going to be like all the way by Tel Aviv. It's growing, expanding out, right? There are new suburbs every few years. There's another suburb. Look at the way it's more generally, Israel flourishes. Right? What was that? We made the desert bloom, exactly. Right? The person, the author, he's like almost stopping and smelling the roses, as it were. Look at, wow, do you see that one? Wow, we should buy a ticket to take a tour of that. We need to go see what that is, right? We need to look out from its peaks, right? Look out, perhaps you've all done this, right? You stand at Heart Sophia and go, wow. I remember just standing there the first time I ever did that. Just stood there. Wow, look at this. The history here. The beauty. It was actually towards the end of the day, so it was actually a very beautiful setting also. In other words, we should take the steps required for the world to see that the land belongs to us and we have returned to it. If we don't appreciate Israel, we don't deserve it. Right? God gave us the land of Israel. We should appreciate it. Look around. Take it in. But just have a sense of wonderment about just how amazing this is. Right? This is God saying, looking over Yerushalayim, one of the coolest things that we could ever do, and inspiring. Look at this place, the history here. This is the place that these words were written basically in. Right? This is what he's trying to tell the people of his time, right? The Bnei Korach, whoever is writing this, right? We should appreciate what God's given to us. Right? We've seen it. We've seen the enemy repelled. Do we appreciate it? Do we walk around? Kasher shamanu kein ra'inu. We heard about it. Now we see it. And look at this place. This is unbelievable. So he says here, the final verse sums up the entire process. For this God, who was the objective guardian of the land and its holy mountain, he was described as the guardian of the land. He is our God for eternity. He will show us love and protection for his people as they join him on this land for eternity. Right? If we appreciate what God has given us, we appreciate the beauty of it, then we have the confidence to be able to say at the end, as the pasuk at the end concludes, right? Kizeh Elokim, this is my God who helped me have this beautiful place. Elokim Olam Va'ed, who is forever with our God. Hu Yinahagenu Almut, he will lead us until eternity, right? Until the end. He's going to be there leading us. Right, he will show his love and protection for the Jewish people as they join him on this land for eternity. He will guide us and protect us from danger. Israel and Jerusalem is the only security for the Jew. He writes here at the end that this is, we know God is a part of our past, our present, and our future in the land of Israel, and is reinforcing that here. So why on Monday? All right, so we said on Sunday it's about realizing God's dominion over the world. And we're a fleeting moment. God is past, present, future. Now we're getting into the week. We're really getting into the week, in a little more depth. What do we need to do? We need to understand. This is not a call to make aliyah suddenly today. Make aliyah. It's a beautiful thing, and we should all think about it at the very least. But the idea being that we understand and we appreciate what God has given the Jewish people. We perhaps in our generation, more than generations of 100 years ago, really ought to appreciate the Jewish people, what God has given us, appreciating what God gives us. And most importantly, what God gives us is the land of Israel, which is our main connection point. You think back to those verses. The Torah is actualized in its perfect form in Israel. Right? You want to go to the extremes, the Ramban, the mitzvot are only applicable in Israel. This is the way our attitude should be towards the beginning of the week. After we realize God's control over the world, we are now appreciative of what God has given us. And for a Jew, that always means being appreciative of Israel being a place that was historically protected. Fortunately, for many, many years, would Jews not have Israel in our hands? David HaMelech didn't know of such a thing. Even if it's sort of very kind of written into the future, you could think of it. He only knew of Israel, of Yerushalayim. We didn't, as a people, have that for such a long time, and for us to have it again is something we ought to not take for granted, and that we should continuously, towards the beginning of our week, always have that reminder about how important Israel is, even for all of us who live in the Chutz La'aretz. We live here in the diaspora. We ought to think about this idea. Yeah.
Like message of, there was love and protection for his people as they joined him. So an understated sense that our
Make Aliyah.
obligation is to be there.
The Ramban would certainly say so. But I mean, look, I think undoubtedly there seems to be a push here, right? That we're going to join him, right? And it's almost like the Tefillah L'Shlom HaMediah, which we say, by the way, every week here. And built into the prayer for the state of Israel, it literally talks about gathering all the Jews into Israel, right? That's undoubtedly a statement of Jews should come back to the land of Israel. Look, everyone in their time, in terms of it certainly should give those of us who are in Chutz La'aretz a moment to pause and think about our level of connection. And again, every circumstance is different. I'm not here to sit and criticize. I live here. I live in Chutz La'aretz. We're all sitting here. I will be very upfront and blunt and open. I have at times I have a yearning for one day that there should be a future in Israel. I don't know when that is. It's not when I retire, as of earlier. But I think Israel should be pulling on our heartstrings, and that's good. If we feel too comfortable, then Israel is lost on us. And I come at that from personally. I'm not speaking for anybody else here. I come at that personally from a religious perspective, right? Because there's so many mitzvot and so much connection mitzvah wise. There's so much connection. Just in terms of the historical element of the Torah's description of what this land means to us and our forefathers, our foremothers, right? This land is very meaningful, and so I think perhaps David HaMelech or again Bnei Korach here, they are trying to pull at our heartstrings and say, with the pasuk you're referring to is, where is it one? Shitu libchem, right? Is that the one? No, that's not the one. Which is the one? You made correct reference. I'm just trying to find it. Right? Your name reaches the end of the earth. Okay. Perhaps that's a reach out, by the way, to the Jews who are living all over. Ismach Har Sion. Sifru Migdaleha, Shitulibchem Chela Parskuar Minoteha. Wanted the Acharon, right? So I'm where is that line though that talks about which part, which pasuk? Oh, what he wrote. Oh, sorry. Right. So circle it, making sure it is ours, count as ours. In other words, we should take steps required to see that this land belongs to us and we return to it, right?
If you're circling its towers and you're circling the land,
you're there. No, for sure. As a people, you this psalm can't be seen from a distance, right? This is a verse of seeing Israel with your own eyes and realizing it with your own body. So I think that look, is it true that this is pulling us? Yeah, maybe it makes us feel uncomfortable. I'm okay with that. I'm okay if it makes us feel a little uncomfortable about being here. I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's not a bad thing to live with a little bit of discomfort. Okay. I sent so many people to Israel. I know. How many Aliyah letters Ryan Morrison writes every year? For this one, this one and that one that come through. I had to write one recently for someone else, actually not in the congregation, somebody I know. They asked me, you have to get to make an Aliyah, you have to get a letter from your rabbi, asserting you're Jewish.
Wow.
And so I asked Ray Morris, I said, do you have a letter? Yeah, I have a letter, the form letter. So he, told someone that's sharing in the office, pulled out the form. It's been filled out dozens and dozens and hundreds of times at this point. People who are making Aliyah. People spend months at a time, and it comes more months at a time, and suddenly spending more months there than you are here. It's not a bad thing.
And it's also
It's
more
not a bad thing.
complicated now to make Aliyah paper wise.
Yeah, it's not. Look, there are definitely a lot of challenges in it, but it's a good thing that we should have a yearning for it and a pull. That's a good feeling to have as a Jew. That Israel still matters to you. That's why even if you're not making Aliyah, somewhere we should all want to in some way make Aliyah, even though